me okay? All right, today we're going to do a little small cherry bowl with a textured rim. I'll pass this around in just a second. It's got some texturing on the bottom as well. I'm starting off with a blank of cherry that's about 2 inches by 9 inches. You can make it any size that you want. I've got one similar to that, probably close to 18, 20 inches in diameter. It's about 4 inches high. So you can upscale or downscale however you want to make the bowl. When you're starting off with this, you need to pay attention to grain direction. So basically, you have your annual rings. They can either be going down like this or up like this. On this particular bowl and the one that I'm passing around, the orientation is like this because there was some sapwood on the bottom of the bowl that I wanted to get rid of. Normally I like turning in this direction here because in this orientation you're going to end up with a bullseye, like what's going around here. With this orientation here you end up with kind of an X pattern that I like a lot better, but sometimes you don't get to have what you want. You have to make do with what the wood has. So I set this up like this, and what I did is I drilled a hole in the center, found the center, drilled a hole for my screw chuck, and I'm going to start this off on a screw center. You can use a faceplate if you don't have a screw center, or you can even start between centers if you want to. So what I did is, first thing I did is made a mark on the back here so that I know where the center of the bowl is going to be. Because if we have to put it on a jam chuck like we're going to do later on, that center mark comes in handy when you want to center the bowl up. So I always make sure that I mark that center. You don't want to have it real deep. I like using a cup center rather than a 60 degree because the hole isn't as big, but you can use whatever you want. So after I found the center here, I measured out about 1 5/8 inches, and I got a ring that's around here, and that's going to be the foot of my bowl. Now you can make the foot any size that you want. This is about the same size as the one that I'm passing around that I did for the demo piece. So we'll get started by making an indentation for the foot, and I'm just going to use a parting tool. And I'm going to go in about, maybe 1/4 inch, give or take. And once I get that done, I'm going to take my bowl gouge and I'm going to get rid of that excess wood that I don't need. And all I'm doing is pulling back on the gouge. And hopefully it's kind of straight. It doesn't really matter one way or the other because you're going to be working with it again anyway. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is kind of true up my rim because I don't really want it as thick as it is. So I'm just going to get rid of about 1/4 inch here just so I know where the top of the bowl is going to be. And all I'm going to do is just go in with just a side cut like that, and that's going to kind of give me the parameters that I need for my diameter and my thickness. So then I'm going to go back around the other way, and I'm going to start making my shape. So what I'm going to do, there's my foot there. I'm just going to come over here like this, and I'm going to start making a series of coves, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term. And all I'm doing is just going to pivot my bowl gouge with my hip. Now you'll notice that I didn't bother going back and truing up that rim because it's really not necessary. You're going to end up hard to talk and turn. So, one last cut and I should be there. All right, now, once I've got that done, I'm going to go back and I'm going to kind of blend in and again, you'll notice I'm not moving my arms. I'm moving the tool, my body. And I'm just trying to blend that in. And again, I'm watching the shape up here, not my tool. Because watching down there watching my tool isn't going to tell me anything. And I'm just going to keep at it until I get a shape that I like. One little hump in there, and we'll call it good. Now at this point, you'll notice that I didn't bring it up all the way to this rim. I want a little bit left there. I think I'm going to take a little bit more off there. So I want to end up with about a good heavy 1/8 of an inch. So just keep playing with it until you're happy with it. But at some point you got to call it good because after a while you just keep going after it. All right, now at this point, I would go back and sand this. I'm not going to sand it because nobody wants to watch anybody sand. But what I would do if I were going to do this is I have a right angle drill with a twist lock pad on it. And I would probably start off with this with about 80 grit and work my way up to probably 240. I usually don't go any farther than that. Now at this point, I'm going to clean up that rim. It's a lot easier to clean up a heavy 1/8 of an inch than it is to try to clean up 2 inches. Now when you're checking, you can either use your tool and see if it bounces. What I usually do is end up putting my finger back here. You don't want to stick it down here because you're going to end up getting it caught between the tool rest and the wood, and then you're going to wish you hadn't done that. So that seems to be pretty good. So I'll just clean that rim up again where I had a little bit of tear out and call it that. Now, after I get done sanding, we can go back and put some texture in here just for a little bit of interest, I guess you could say. And what I've got is this Sorby tool here. It's just a little small version of the one that they sell with the great big one. I've got another one that I bought from Eli Avocera, the turner from Israel. It's not quite as sharp as this one, and I like it a little bit better. I'm going to take and knock some of these points off later on. But I found the tool from Eli when I made the demo bowl that's going around now. I found the tool that I bought from Ellie on Wednesday when I made that bowl. You think I could find it when I packed my toolbox last night? I bet you I looked for an hour and I still didn't find it. So we'll just have to make do with this one. So somewhere on this area, after I get all this sanded, I'm just going to put a little interest texture about right there. All right, so I'm going to turn the speed down about there. And I'm just going to take this tool and I'm going to kind of put it at an angle. Get it a little bit away from the bowl. I'm going to put it at an angle, slight angle, and I'm just going to draw it along the bowl. And then check to see what I've got. Cherry kind of tears a little bit. That's what I don't like about this tool. It's a little sharper than what I want, and you get a lot of tear out on it, especially on the end grain. But it'll suffice for what we're doing. All right, then once you get the texture in there, next thing we're going to do is use a point tool and come in and bracket the texturing that we had there so that it looks like it's supposed to be there. Now normally when you look at the bowl that's going around, you'll see that there's some texture right against the foot, and we'll put that in a little bit later, or we could do it right now as far as that goes. No, we'll do it later. So the back side now is pretty much done. I'm going to leave this go until we get the bowl on the jam chuck. So the next thing we need to do is make a jam chuck. No, we need to put it in the chuck. So I'm going to take it off of here. This screw center that I'm using is one that Glazer makes out in California. Jerry Glazer was one of the pioneers in turning, and he kind of perfected this particular screw center. It's a really nice tool. I use it a lot. If I have a piece of wood that's not quite as deep, what I've done is I can take this off, and it comes with different size plates up to 5 inches, so that it'll give your wood a lot of support. If I want the screw to be shorter, what I've done is I've made like a washer, a wooden washer that's about 3/8 of an inch thick that fits over top of this, and then I screw it on here, and I can limit the amount of screw that's in the thread a lot easier than trying to move it in and out. So that's one of the better screw centers that I found, because the screw itself has kind of like a really sharp edge on it, and it bites the wood really, really well. I think it's a 120. And what I'm going to do is put it in here on that foot that I made. Now, everybody says that you should use the smallest diameter on here that you can, but that wouldn't give me the size of the foot that I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the 3 inches like I laid out here, and what's going to happen is that it's going to bite into the foot, but I've allowed for that so that I've got room that I can turn those marks off, and it's not going to be a problem. Now when I'm putting the chuck, or the piece of wood in the chuck, you don't want to hold it like this or anything like this. What I do is I take my thumb and I put it in the center and I push in. That makes sure that I'm not cocking the bowl in the chuck and getting it to wobble. So I'm going to tighten it down. And then go back and start working on the top of my bowl. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the excess wood that I have here, the same way that I did before. And all I'm doing is leaning backwards. I'm not using my arms or anything. I'm just holding my arms rigid, and I'm just leaning backwards. Okay, so now I've got rid of the excess. So now it's time to start making the rim. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here about maybe a third of the way of the bowl, and I'm going to make a cut in there like that. Now, when you're making the rim, it seems to work a little bit better if that rim has a little bit of a crown to it. If it's has a little bit of an arc. Your fingers tend to follow that arc a lot better than it's flat. I've also seen it where it's tapered in like this and straight, and that seems to look pretty good as well, but I do like the more of a taper there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to readjust my tool rest. And that seems to be pretty good. So at this point, I am going to go back and sand that a little bit. Now when I'm sanding anything on the lathe, I always turn my speed down. There's no point in generating a lot more heat than what we need. So I'm just going to take them again. I'm going to move my body and pivot. So I've gone 80, 120, 150. My mandrels and my discs are a little old. Guess I shouldn't have put that in my pocket. All right, so I've got that sanded, so now I'm going to go back and put the texturing in. Now you don't have to really texture this rim. It looks good without it. If I were going to leave it like that, I just have to kind of mask things off on the bottom. This part up in here you don't really have to worry too much about because you're going to turn it off anyway. So if you decide to paint the rim black, that also looks good. You could put gold leaf on it. That also looks good. There's a number of different colors, I guess you could say, for gold leaf. When you start getting the multicolored ones or the copper ones or the actual gold ones or antique gold or whatever it is. So there's a number of options for foil that you can use for that. Or you can take a dry brush where you're taking just a little bit of paint on a kind of a stiff bristle blot it off a little bit so it's not a lot on there, and just kind of start dabbing it. And you can use different colors for that. I've got a bowl that Terry Scott from New Zealand made that used that process, and it's really a nice looking rim on that. So there's a number of options that you can do for that. You don't really have to texture it if you don't want to, or you don't have the tools for it. Questions, anything, anywhere up to this point?
What speed do you have the texturing done at?
I have no idea. I usually at home, I go about 450, give or take. Anyone else?
Joe, going back to the base, is there any rule of thumb about the diameter for aesthetics or balance or whatever?
I've always thought that you don't want it too big and you don't want it too small. If it's too small, it's wobbly. If it's too big, it looks clunky. So basically you just go by what looks good to you. This one happens to be, probably about 9 inches, but it's about a third of what it is, because this is 9 inches, and I made the foot about 3. But the foot's going to end up being smaller because I have to cut the marks that the chuck is going to leave on it in there to get rid of those. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll texture this rim. Now on the one that's going around, I made 2 passes with the texturing tool. This one looks like it's been tearing out a little bit more, so I don't know what's going to happen with this. It all goes back to maybe, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. So we don't know what this is going to be until we do it. And the nice thing about this, if you don't like it, you can always turn it off and do something else. So you're not locked into whatever we have here. So again, I've got it about, maybe a 22.5 degree angle. I'm going to get it in there in the corner. And I'm just going to drag it out and stop and see what it looks like. Well, that didn't hardly do anything, so we'll do it again. And that's not too bad. We'll do it one more time. So now I'm going to go back with there it is. I'm going to go back with a brass brush, and I'm just going to knock off some of the little fuzzies that are on there. Brass seems to work better than steel because steel sometimes makes marks. Brass is a little bit more forgiving, and that'll get rid of some of the fuzzies there. And then I'm going to go back with my sander and kind of touch up that rim a little bit. Because I had some tear out on the edge. That's not bad. That's pretty good. All right, now, the next thing we've got to do is start working on the actual bowl. And there's 2 things that you can do here. I was talking to somebody about a beading tool that I made, and I think I'm going to put that on there instead of that sharp edge that's on there, just to show you something different. That sharp edge is just, all I did on that was I just didn't bring my gouge back that far, and I left that little lip that's sticking up there for a little bit of interest. I've got this beading tool. I don't know if you can see it or not. Where's the best place to put it? Well, I'll pass it around when I'm done. All it is a U-shaped gouge that I got from Doug Thompson, and I put it on the grinder and I ground a flat on it. And so that ended up giving me a bead-like shape on the tool itself. So what I'm going to do, oops, helps to go the right way. So I'm just going to put this in here like this. Guess I should have done that first. Well, we can fix that. So all that's all you got to do, and you'll see it when I pass it around. I'm going to knock off that little corner that I ended up with in there. Yeah, that still looks pretty good. Now this beading tool really works pretty slick. I've got them in 3 different sizes. You want to use the U-shaped gouges when you get it. He's got them in 3 different sizes. I've got, I think, I've got an 1/8. This is, I think, 1/4 or 3/8, and I've got another one too. I don't remember if it's bigger or smaller, but that really works pretty slick, and they're really easy to make. So we've got our rim, we've got the bead on there, and now we're going to go back and take care of the actual dish. So I'm going to start here. In the center, and I'm going to start hogging some of this stuff out. You just want to bounce a little bit. I don't know if that's the spacer that's on there or what. Stop that and tighten that up. So this part is just like any other turning. You're just going to start hogging out the center. Now when I'm doing this, I'm going to leave a series of steps in there. That'll give my gouge something to write on when I go back and try to clean things up. Now, if you have a problem with your tool skating on you when you're trying to make an entry, hold your tool so that the tool is completely closed. Make your entrance, and then you can turn it and start making your cut. Because once you get a flat in there, I don't know why that's bouncing. Try a different tool. Maybe that got a little dull. Now you can either go across like this or you can start going backwards. Backwards seems to get a lot quicker because you're not dealing with end grain. All right, so now we got to start thinking about how deep we're going to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a pencil in there, kind of gauge how deep I am, and I've got plenty to go. So we'll just keep doing this. I caught a little edge of that bead, so I'm going to have to go back and fix that. Clean the rest of my waste away. Just a hair more. Now we're getting down into one last cut territory. That's not too bad. I think we'll just leave it at that. Yeah, that'll work. About 12, I guess. I really don't know. I can't read the readout on it. I usually turn everything about around 1,000 to 1,500, give or take. You don't really need anything that faster unless you're doing something really, really tiny. So, we've got this pretty much all squared away. Obviously, what you would do is go back and sand this. You want a nice, smooth flowing curve on this inside of your bowl. And you really can't tell with just looking at it. So if you take your fingertips and just run it along from one side to another, that'll tell you far more than your eyes ever will. It'll tell you whether you've got a nice, smooth flowing curve on that. Now I've got a little dimple in the middle, so I'm going to go back and knock that off. I could just sand that off and it would probably work just as well. But now we've got to deal with the back. So what I've found is that MDF seems to work really well for jam chucks. It's cheap, it's fairly stable, you don't really have to worry too much about it warping and stuff on you, and it's usually thick enough that you can do something with it. If you need something that's bigger, you can always glue a couple pieces together. But this 3/4 inch MDF seems to work really well for the different bowls. I start this the same way that I do the bowl itself. I'm going to put it in a jam chuck. And what I've got to do is very carefully hog out the center so the bowl will fit in there. I'm kind of hoping that this one will fit in there so I have a backup. And that's just a little bit bigger, but we'll make do. All right, so you don't really have to go all the way across. What I've done is I've left a center section in there that's going to be inside the bowl itself, so we don't have to worry about it. All right, so this piece here is just a hair under 8 1/4. So I'm going to come over here. So half of 8 1/4 is 4 1/8. So I'm going to come over here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Wrong hole. When I do this, all right. So I got to knock off a little bit more. Works so much better when you've got a ruler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the recess that I'm making is smaller than the bowl itself, because I want to work up to the actual bowl. I could go a little bit more than that. All right. So I'm going to take my parting tool. And I really don't like the smell of this MDF, but it works so well, so I'll deal with it. Now hopefully I can use this to get rid of some of that, and I don't have to deal with the MDF and sweaty shirts don't really go together. Now it's just a matter of trial and error. And it's literally make a cut and check it, make a cut and check it, because all it's going to take is one little too much, and you have to start over. And remember, if you're taking 1/8 of an inch off this side, you're also taking 1/8 of an inch off the other side, which means you've taken off 1/4 of an inch. So you've got to keep that in mind. Now we're starting to get into dangerous territory. This is where you can't be impatient. Now you've basically got two types of parting tools. One, you've got this diamond parting tool that has two little wings that are out there, and then you've got another type of parting tool that's just flat all the way up. I like these ones better for most things, but when you're getting up to a shoulder like that, this edge of this diamond tends to throw the tool out, and it's hard to get a straight square corner. So this one works a lot better, and this one's sharper. So we'll check this, and hopefully we'll make the one last cut. Now this is where you always screw it up, because you've got just a hair to take off. There we go. And that's the kind of fit that you want. Now, if I turn this on and I start trying to turn this, chances are it's going to fly out because there's really the only thing holding that in there is tension. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my tailstock up just for support. And I'm going to secure it a little bit more with the strapping tape. When I went looking for this stuff Friday rather, I couldn't find it anywhere. I went to 5 different stores and I finally found a 2-inch thick piece at Busy Beaver. And I didn't realize it was going to be so hard to find it. So what I finally ended up doing is I ordered some. It was supposed to be here last night, but of course it wasn't. So we've got enough to get us going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come across here and I'm just going to make like a web on there. And that's what's actually going to hold it into the jam chuck. Make sure it's as tight as it can go. And then I learned the hard way that you also have to put a row of tape on the outside, because sometimes the ends of those things get to flopping and they come off. Okay, it's gone. And we'll clean this up a little bit. Okay, now, this area here next to the foot is really difficult to sand. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little small textured pattern in there as well, just to, eliminate that sanding. Pretty good. And then bracket it with the point tool. Now, Terry Scott down in New Zealand calls these texturing tools his $10 tools, because every time it touches the bowl, the price goes up $10. So it works pretty good. All right, so we're done with that part of it. So now all we have to do is finish up the foot. And this is where that strapping tape comes in handy. Always take your live center out, unless you want your elbow to be tattooed. All right. A bowl always sets better on a ring than it does a flat surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to undercut this a little bit. Make sure this is flat. And then I would sand that. And finally, I don't like a flat edge on the foot, so I'm just going to make a little cove on that. And now you can sand that. Now you can put a little bit of texturing in there if you want. Now when I put my name on here, I like to bracket it with a ring, so I've got something to follow when I end up doing the burning. And then you can come in through here if you want. And just kind of texture that a little bit as well. And then knock the fuzzies off again. So all that's left to do pretty much is put my name on it. That was a fluke. I don't know. I'm going to have to go back and practice. When it happened, I thought, oh, that's cool. But then I couldn't remember how I did it. I think what I did is I had it straight up and down and just dragged it across. That seems to be what I did. All right, now all that's left to do is get it out of here. And the easiest way I've found is just taking wrap on the back of this, maybe. That was really a tight fit. Well, I guess I did get it on there tight. What's that? Is that called a design change? What, the tight like this? No, I'm not hitting it. Boy, that did get in there. All right. There we go. Where there's a will, there's a way. So, that's it. Any questions? Anyone? Yeah, you could do that. I've never found the need for paying that much money for an extra tool that I can make basically for free. When I started turning, there weren't any four-jawed chucks. Everything that you did was either on a glue block or a jam chuck like this. And so that's basically what I've gotten used to. I've got a vacuum system at home that I use at home, and so I've never really felt the need for cold jaws. But I'm sorry? Well, that's true too. It was all, I had my wife over there peddling. Anyone else? I think I started turning for real, I guess you could say. I taught woodshop for 30 years and started in 1970. So if you are teaching that kind of stuff, you basically have to know how to do it. So I dabbled a little bit in it and off and on. And then about 1986, 87, when the AEW was formed, I was one of the founding members of North Coast. And as a matter of fact, my AEW number is 442. So I've been in it a long time. I did a lot of craft shows back in the late 80s, early 90s, and when I retired in 2000, I was going to do craft shows because I was doing a lot of high-end ones out on the East Coast, and I did one show out in Maryland that it was worth $8,000 to me for a weekend show. So there was some decent money in it. Then 9/11 happened, and nobody wanted to gather in large groups anymore, so the bottom kind of fell out of the craft fair market. And so I found something else to do. And so I've been dabbling off and on, but I really don't do a whole lot of turning anymore because I don't have any place to put anything. I don't have any place to get rid of it. So my wife complains when there's too much junk around the house. So I basically only turn when I'm doing stuff like this or if somebody wants a class on something. I just put a coat of oil on it. Usually Watco or boiled linseed oil that's cut. And normally what I do is wipe it off, wait a day or two, and then I usually spray it with a satin lacquer, just rattle can lacquer, Deft normally. Although from what I understand, Deft is going to be kind of hard to get because of all the VOC solid rules that are coming in.